I'm Dennis. Welcome and to automate your RevOps stack with Notion and Zapier. This event is co-sponsored by both Zapier and Notion, who we partner with really closely. So a little bit about me. So I'm Dennis, and I lead a consultancy called workFlowers. So just in case there's any confusion, we're not employees of either Zapier or Notion, but we're a consultancy that specializes in helping small teams increase their operational efficiency using tools like Zapier and Notion to power automation, AI workflows, and analytics for lean early stage teams across Asia. I started workFlowers in late 2024 after a very old 20-plus year career across nonprofit, investment banking, and then tech, including 6 years leading go-to-market ops and finance for Twitter APAC, and some time at a SaaS startup. Also here tonight, actually we don't even have everyone on the slide, but there's Nasri, who is a fellow Notion consultant. I don't know where he is right now, but he's going to be speaking in a little bit. Ernest, who is also a Notion consultant, but he's just kind of doing AV tonight. And then a couple folks we couldn't fit on the slide in time, but Peter, our newest member of the team, who is just stuffing his face right in front of me, and Jade, who is hovering around as well. So that's a bit about us, a little bit about you. So this is a Notion dashboard. So this is also just showing off one of the features of Notion that a lot of people may not be familiar with, is the ability to do much more robust charts, and especially dashboards where you can put a bunch of charts together in a single layout. And this is also using one of their newest features called Notion Workers, that let you create scripts that will sync data from an external source like Luma into a Notion database so that you can then visualize it. So this is actually all the people who have checked in the app since you guys started arriving. And we're showing the breakdown of the survey questions. Sorry, this is really tiny for the people in the back. But basically what the breakdown is showing, we wanted to know basically what people's level of experience was with Zapier and Notion. So on the Zapier side, almost everyone is pretty new to Zapier who's here. On the Notion side, most people have some experience with Notion, either as part of a growing team or early stage startup, then a few folks who are just exploring or using it for personal use. And then in terms of function or role, it looks like about half of the folks who are in the room are kind of at the founder executive level, probably a lot of early stage startups. Then we've got folks in sales and marketing, operations, and then a sprinkling of a few other types of roles. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to do mostly co-building of automation workflows that you can do that bring together Notion and Zapier in the context of go-to-market or revenue operations. So a lot of this is going to revolve around if you're using Notion as a hub for your business. So everyone knows about Notion as a note-taking app, but you can do a lot more with it, and a key use case for it is as a CRM. CRMs are really, really expensive. Most people I know don't like the CRM they're using now, whether that's HubSpot or Salesforce. Notion can actually serve as a CRM, but it takes a little bit more effort to get all the pieces to fit together the way you want them in Notion. And Zapier is one of the really useful tools to help you do that. So we'll be building together. You can follow along on your laptops if you want. I sent out a link to a template for the CRM, the demo CRM that we're going to be building in Notion or working with. You can install that in your Notion workspace if you want to follow along. But you will need a Zapier account with at least a trial on the Pro plan. You can ask questions at any time. Just raise your hand and someone should come up to you with a mic. And feel free to sort of interrupt us anytime. Or you can scan this QR code and that'll just take you to a form where you can submit a question and then we can come to get to it at the end. And then food and drinks, yeah, anytime, just go ahead and grab some food. Okay, so how do Notion and Zapier fit together? So basically the way I recommend thinking about it is use Notion as the context layer where key pieces of your work live. So your CRM is a great example, but it doesn't have to be your CRM. It could be your meeting notes. It could be your docs. It could be your projects and tasks. You can basically find a way to use Notion for almost anything. And so think of it as kind of the hub where key pieces of your work live. Where Zapier comes in is when you need to connect Notion to any other system, basically. And Zapier helps you connect Notion to over 9,000 other SaaS apps. Basically, virtually any SaaS app that you've heard of probably has a Zapier integration that lets you connect it to Notion and other tools to do lots of cool automations. So you think about like when you want something that happens in Notion to trigger a bunch of actions in some other system, like create a Slack channel, ping a Slack channel, send an email, you create a Google Drive folder, anything you can sort of think of, Zapier really helps you pull that together with Notion. And a quick note, AI is everywhere. We're going to actually do a little bit of a curveball here and mostly focus on deterministic, non-AI automation. Not because we have anything against AI, we use it a ton, but I think we're kind of in this moment now where there's so much attention on AI, and AI is great for a lot of things, but there's a lot of automation that doesn't need AI. And if you just want automation that's going to follow a very specific, concrete set of steps, using deterministic automation with a tool like Zapier is going to be more reliable, faster, and basically a lot cheaper as well. So I think it's important to kind of understand where AI sort of fits in and what it's really good for and where you don't actually need it, and instead of just kind of applying AI to everything. So we've done actually a lot of other events about all of Notion's AI capabilities, and they're really awesome, but that's not really what the focus of tonight is going to be. Okay, so just a little bit of backdrop on, and again, I'm sorry, this is small for the folks in the back. I thought they would have a bigger TV. But basically, every automation, essentially, at least a deterministic automation, has more or less the same kind of basic elements. So first is your trigger. Your trigger is basically something happens somewhere in a system. A deal gets closed, an email gets sent, something gets tagged with a certain label. That's your trigger, and that's when you want the automation to kick off. Then in the middle, you have some sort of logic. That might be a guardrail, like should this thing run or not? Because maybe you don't want the automation to run every single time a deal closes or every single time you receive an email. So you have some logic in between that either might kill the automation in some scenarios, or you might have branches where you do different things in different scenarios. So like an if statement in Excel. Then there's the actual doing of the thing, so whatever you're trying to accomplish. And then the last step, which is optional but usually recommended, is after you've completed the action in the other system, you probably want to have some record of that back in the first system. So if you closed a deal in your CRM and then you created a Slack channel, then you probably want to write back to your deal record in the CRM and say, here's a link to the Slack channel so people can find it from there. And so what we're going to be working with, let me just jump out of this, is the CRM template that we sent out to everyone. And we can resend it after. So a CRM is basically just a bunch of databases on the back end. You have different sets of data for common objects, and any CRM, whether it's HubSpot, Salesforce, or Notion, will have those basic elements, which is your contacts, like your actual humans that you talk to, your companies, or accounts, you might call them, just the companies that you're talking to. Then you probably have a separate database for deals, so one record per deal. And then you might have other things like communications, like emails and meeting notes and things like that. That kind of structure for a CRM lends itself really well to Notion in the sense that Notion lets you create lots of databases, and it lets you connect records in one database to records in another with something called the relation property if you've used Notion databases before. The thing that Notion doesn't do out of the box that a conventional CRM does is automatically linking stuff together. So if you are in HubSpot and you enter a new contact and you have their email address and they're at google.com, HubSpot's automatically going to link them to your company record for Google because it can figure that out. Notion doesn't do that out of the box, and that's a big thing that you need in a CRM because you don't want to have to manually link them when all the information you need is already there. And so that's where something like Zapier comes in. So that is, I think, a key enabler if you wanted to use Notion as a CRM, is you want to automate all those basic things so that you're not spending all day long just linking records or having them go unlinked to their companies. So in our sample CRM, which again, you guys will all be able to install this in your own Notion workspaces and adapt them or use them as you want. Once you have your CRM set up in Notion, you can do the same kind of things that you could do in a typical CRM, like have different visualizations of your deal activity and deals by stage. You can have your Kanban board to show how the deal pipeline is progressing, and you have your records for all of your contacts and all of your companies, as well as your recent emails, upcoming meetings. All of that stuff can be tied together. But again, the layer that really makes it work is having the automation that connects things without you having to do it automatically. And there's other things that you want your CRM to do automatically that, again, Notion won't do by itself, but Zapier can help you with. So what we'll do is walk through 3 examples. So I'll do the first 2, and then Nasri will jump in and do the third. So the first one is something that every CRM typically will do is automatically enrich your contacts to some degree. So you add a new record, maybe all you have is a person's email address. You don't want to spend time like doing a bunch of web research just to find out basic information like the person's name, job title, et cetera. So we'll walk through a workflow that will do some basic enrichment on Notion using a data service called NinjaPair. There's a million of these data enrichment services. You can pick whatever you want, but NinjaPair is the one I'll demo today. Then I'm going to do a deal pipeline automation. So again, like every CRM will have some kind of automations that will trigger when deals reach different stages in your pipeline. You don't want to do all this stuff manually. So the example I'll show is a pretty big classic one. When a deal closes, we'll use Zapier to create a Google Drive a Google Drive folder for that client, copy the folder link back to the company record so everyone can easily find it. And you can also do things like spin up a Slack channel so you can collaborate with your team or with the client around that deal. And then Nasri is going to do a workflow that's I alluded to earlier, which is you create a new record in the CRM. You don't want to have to link them to the company manually. So we'll show you how to do that automatically and not only link them to the company, but what if we don't have a record for this company yet? The automation can create that for you and then link it to the contact. And last one, I'm almost certain we won't have time for this, but the link will be in there when we send this document out afterwards. But this is more on the marketing side. This is closed loop attribution. You can show an automation where if you're doing marketing and you're running ad campaigns, one of the things you really want to do is report back to the ad platforms that you're using whenever you have some valuable signal that can help the ad platforms improve campaign optimization for future targeting. So, when you close a deal or when someone books a meeting, fills out a form, whatever it is, you want to send that signal back to your ad platforms, whether that's Meta or LinkedIn, so that they can use that to help better improve their targeting. So again, we'll send you, we've already sent you the CRM template. We'll send you this presentation, and this presentation has in it links to templates for the workflows that we're going to build that you can install in your own Zapier workspace, and you can configure to whatever setup you have. And then at the end, we'll have some time for questions. So if you scan that QR code earlier and submit questions, they'll show up here. Okay, so with that, I am going to jump over. First, let's have a look at the CRM. So first, the first example we talked about was contact enrichment. So I add a record to the CRM, and I want it to be automatically populated with some data. So to kick this off, well, here, let me show you first. I will rebuild this from scratch in a moment, but a finished workflow will look something like this. So you have your trigger, which is new contact added in Notion. In this case, I didn't build any additional logic, but you have your action to do the thing, which is look up this person based on whatever information we do have and get more information, and then write it back to your CRM. So for this example, I'm going to create a new page, or a new entry, and let's say I just have a LinkedIn profile. This is my own LinkedIn profile that I'm just going to put in here, and that's all we have. So I'm going to create a new copy of this to show you kind of the building from scratch. So the basic automation in Zapier is called a zap, and you have at least one trigger and one action. So your trigger is going to be new contact entered in the CRM. So I'm going to pick Notion for the app. Now here, you have to select the account. I've already connected my Notion account to Zapier, but if you haven't, all you have to do is click this button. It'll kick you out to another tab. You just sign into Notion, you click approve, 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 and you're good to go. And then you choose your trigger event. So for any app, and let me blow this up. So for any app that integrates with Notion, they'll have a range of trigger options, and it's sort of up to the app developer what options they want to offer. But basically, these are the things that can kick off an automation. So in Notion, you can see there's options like new data source item. This is what we actually want. That's a new record in a database somewhere. But it could also be a new comment on a page. Somebody changed one of the property values on a database item, but we want new data source item. So we hit continue. Now you configure the steps. So the only thing you need to configure in this trigger is the data source. So which database do you want this trigger to be kind of monitoring? So I've called this demo contacts database my contacts template. So I'll select that. And then the last step is to do a test, which is basically just do a pull of sample data so you kind of know what you're working with, and then you can use that to build the rest of your automation. So I'm going to hit test, and it's going to pull a few records. And this should be the one I just created. Yeah, OK. So this is the record that I pulled. So now we have to do something with this information. So again, the service that I'm demonstrating for data enrichment is something called Ninja Pair. They're actually a Singapore-based company. They've only been around a year or two, but they do data enrichment. So again, I'm going to select my account, and there's just one action in this automation. Oh, I got to reconnect it. Sorry. OK, that's not working, so we're going to switch. So the nice thing about Zapier is it integrates with a million different things. So I'm going to use a different data enrichment service, which is called Harvest API. Select my account. And this is one of the things I like about Zapier and Notion both, is that they're kind of like composable building blocks where you can assemble different solutions and different ways of attacking a problem. So you're not kind of tied into just one approach. So with Harvest API, similar thing, you just feed in a LinkedIn profile. Now, when you click into this field, you have to tell it what you want it to, what is the profile URL. And obviously, you don't want to just type one in, because that's not the point. You don't want to just look up the same LinkedIn profile URL every time. So this little plus button here lets you select a field from any one of the preceding steps in the Zap. So each step in a Zap returns a whole bunch of data. And this can look scary at first because you can see here, Notion in particular returns a ton of data. There's a lot of fields here, most of which you don't care about. So fortunately, you can just search. I'm going to search for LinkedIn. And now we can run the test. And basically what Harvest API is going to do is, just from the LinkedIn profile, it's going to pull whatever public data is available on the profile. While we wait for that, I'll just start adding the next step. So the next step is obviously you take that data, and then you want to write it back to Notion. So Right click there. Okay, everything is not really cooperating right now. I'm just running that. Oh, okay, there. Okay, so you can see from my LinkedIn profile, it found my first name, my last name, headline, basically all the data from LinkedIn. It's even got the my profile photo, my email address, which I didn't have originally on the contact record in the CRM. All I had was the LinkedIn link. So last step now is just to write that back to the record in the CRM. So the action for that, so this is a different list from Notion now, because now these are all the things you can do. So before we were looking at the triggers, all the things that can start an automation. These are all the things you can do inside the automation once it's begun. So this is a much longer list, but the one we want to run is to update a data source item. That's basically update the page in the contacts database. So again, we have to tell Zapier which database are we trying to update, and it is contacts template, and it's asking us for the item, which basically means the record in the database. Now again, it'll give you a drop-down menu if you wanted to just select a specific page and have that static. But again, in this case, we want it to be dynamic. We want it to be the same page that triggered the automation in the first place. So instead of me manually choosing one here and locking that in, if I hit this 3 dots button over here, I can select a custom value. And again, I can choose anything from up in the previous steps. So the one I want is the ID of the record that triggered the automation in the first place. So if I go to my trigger, and it'll be named something slightly different in different apps, but in this case, it's just called ID. And now I can start filling in all the information. So a quick shortcut is instead of hitting this plus button, if I just hit backslash, I can start searching. So what I want to do is I want to fill in the contact's name. So I want to put together the first name and last name. So if I start searching for first, I see, oh, okay, this harvest API step, it found a first name for this person. Let me add a space. And now let's search for the last name. There it goes. Let's see, email. Did it find an email address? Again, I'm going to search for it. And yes, it found my email address. And then you can go on and on. Location. You can separate out first and last name. Job title. Let's see, did it find a job title? I think it did. Yeah, current job title. So I'm going to plug that in. And again, you get the idea. So now I can test that, and then we should be able to see that back in the CRM here. Yep. So this is the record. So now it's filled in my email address, it's filled in my title, and you can even add more things, like if there's a profile photo on the person's LinkedIn page, you can actually set that as the page icon here. So instead of a blank or instead of emoji, it's actually their profile photo from LinkedIn. And so that's how you can set up your CRM so that all of this stuff gets automatically sort of enriched as new records get added. So this can get a little more complicated if you, for example, maybe you don't have the person's LinkedIn profile. And Harvest API only works with if you already have their LinkedIn profile. So a scenario here might be, well, maybe depending on what information I already have, I might want to do something different, right? If I have their LinkedIn profile, I can use Harvest API and get the information that way. But maybe there's a different scenario. Maybe I have their email address instead. So this is where you can start building in more complex logic into a Zap, and that's paths. So paths are basically what they sound like, which is you can go down a different path in different scenarios. So what I can do is before this LinkedIn profile step, I can add a step in between. And in Zapier, it's one of the kind of built-in utilities, and it's called paths. And what it looks like is this. So it's going to split off into 2 paths, and you have to define when you want each path to run. So in this case, I want this path that uses Harvest API to only run if we already have a LinkedIn profile, because otherwise it's not going to work. So in this box here where it says only continue if, I can define my conditions. And so I only want this to run if the LinkedIn field on the contact record is already filled out. So I select the field, and now I have to choose the condition. There's a lot of options here, like if you wanted to match a certain text string, or if it's a number greater or less than something. But what I want is, oh, sorry, it's getting blocked by this thing, exists. So basically I'm saying only continue on this path if the LinkedIn property is already filled out and there's a value in there. So I hit continue, and it'll run a little test, and it'll tell me for this sample record that I'm looking at, this would have continued. So okay, so now we're good on this path. So now we need the next path, which is, okay, well, what if the first path doesn't happen? So what are my conditions for the next option? Now, I could just go in and do the exact opposite of what I did and say LinkedIn profile does not exist, and that'll define what we want to happen next. Or a quicker way, if you only have these two options, instead of custom rules here, I can choose fallback. And fallback means this is the last thing, like the sort of last resort thing that will happen if none of the other things are true, the other conditions. So I can just say fallback, there's no LinkedIn. And what I would do here, there are other services that let you look up people from just an email address, or maybe you just have a first name, last name, and the name of the company they work at. Or you have their name and the website domain of the company, but you don't have their email address or LinkedIn. Those kind of things. So one of those, there's a lot of services. One of them is called Apollo. And so you could add a step here, use Apollo to fetch the enrichment data from whatever information you already have, and then essentially do the same thing. So I'm not going to build the Apollo step because it's pretty much more of the same. But one thing at the end is then you'd want to do this last step again, is take whatever data that you got from the enrichment service and then write it back into the contact record in your CRM. So in this case, one quick trick is instead of me having to set everything up from scratch, you can actually copy and paste within a Zap. So I can copy this block, and I can click here and paste it below. And so now I don't have to start from scratch. So it's already got the contacts database set up. It's already figured out that it's going to go back to the same record that triggered the automation. I do have to edit some things though, because in here I was piping in fields that came from the harvest step, which is not relevant on this path because that didn't happen on this path. So instead, I would have to repoint it to the data I got from this step right above. But at least this saves me a little bit of time. So that is how you would set up contact enrichment in a Notion CRM with Zapier. Let me pause there. I don't know if I was going fast or if there are any questions. Yeah. Oh, yes. Sorry about that. Any other questions? Yes.
How do you know which API you should use in your automation? So as you know that Harvest is for linking. So how do I know the Harvest is for linking?
A lot of that is just doing some quick Googling or chatting with AI about finding out what the different services available are. But there's like hundreds of these different data enrichment services. So I've tried a few of them. Some of them can be quite dodgy. So you also have to be a little bit wary of where they're getting their data from, and is it fully legit? Because you don't necessarily want to be using a service that's non-compliant. But there's a lot of them available.
Can I find this information on the Zapier website?
Zapier will let you search through basically of the 9,000 different integrations that they have. You can search by category and find what services actually have a Zapier integration. And that's a pretty good way to discover new services and apps that you might want to use. That's one of the reasons why developers prioritize building integrations for Zapier, because they know it helps them find new customers that are using Zapier for other things.
My question is, if the automation that you want is within Notion, you also have to go out to Zapier and then it does it in Notion, or is there a way to just do it in Notion?
So yeah, that's actually a really good question. So there are actually some automations that are entirely within Notion, and actually the one Nasri is going to show in a little while, where you link the contact to the company. All of that data is in Notion itself, right?
Okay.
Notion does have some automation features that are built into databases, but there are certain things that automation feature can't do, even though all the data is within Notion. And so there's a lot of automations that we have running in Zapier just because even though everything's in Notion, you can't use Notion's native automation features to pull that off. Now this is changing a little bit because Notion recently rolled out a new feature called Notion Workers. And but that is really more of a power user, more of a developer-friendly feature that lets you write code that you can deploy on Notion's infrastructure that can do all kinds of things like automation, like syncing data, like the chart that I showed before that was showing the breakdown of everyone who's checked into this event from Luma. That's using Notion Workers. But it's not very approachable unless you're comfortable working in GitHub, working with a coding agent like Claude Code or Codex, or writing the code by hand, although no one really does that anymore. So Zapier kind of gives you a sweet spot where it's more powerful than Notion's built-in automation capabilities, but user-friendly enough that you don't have to be comfortable writing code. Yes?
Yeah, I know you talked about AI,
Uh-huh.
not using AI for this, but can you use like Claude or Codex to actually help with this automation? Like
To help build the automation.
Yeah, right. You were doing this manually, right?
Yeah. So actually, yeah, that's a very good question. So a lot of the way the automation space is evolving now is taking advantage of the fact that coding agents make coding accessible to a much larger group of people. So I'm not going to show it now, but I have early access to an entirely kind of new version of the Zapier platform where everything is done in code. So you just tell Claude Code what you want your automation to do, how to basically describe your logic in plain language. It writes the code, and you still get a visual layout of like the blocks and the steps, but in actuality, all of the action is happening here in code. And I think just to like take a step back, the reason that no-code automation platforms like Zapier evolved in the first place is because it gave you a way to like build these kinds of chains and logic without having to know any code, right? It abstracted away the need to read and write code. But with coding agents, they actually do a better job of that. So again, you're just talking to Claude or you're talking to Codex, and they're actually much faster if they can just read and write code than, so Zapier has a built-in Copilot feature here, which I haven't shown because I personally don't think it works very well. Because what the current version of the Copilot is trying to do is like drag these blocks around and tick all the drop-down menus. In the new version of the platform that's kind of in this like early beta stage, because everything is expressed in code, Claude Code or Codex can write a whole super complex automation in like minutes. So that is something that's evolving and coming. So I think that what's happening is the line between no code and code is getting very blurred because you don't actually need to understand all the code to be able to work with these tools.
And just follow up, the same thing would apply to Notion as well, right? The automation in Notion, you can use Claude Code to do those automations?
Yeah, Notion Workers, yeah. So Notion Workers can do a few things. One is, like I showed, syncing data from some external source. Another one is these kind of automations. So something happens in this database and I want a whole bunch of other stuff to happen. If you wanted to be able to communicate with other SaaS tools, you'd have to put in like API keys with whatever other apps you wanted to talk to. Or you can use another way these kind of come together. This is like more advanced stuff that I wasn't planning to cover, but there's a new thing called the Zapier SDK, which is a way for coding agents to, instead of you having to go and get API keys for all your different apps and then give them to your coding agent and write them into a script, basically your coding agent can leverage all of the apps that you've already connected to Zapier and then basically just use them. So you just give your coding agent access to your Zapier workspace, and then whatever apps you have connected to Zapier, your coding agent can write stuff with them. So actually in some of my Notion workers, I do that because then it saves me the time. I already have all my apps connected to Zapier, and then I just have to do one connection from Zapier to Notion, and then everything kind of flows from there. So there's a lot of ways this space is evolving so quickly.
Thank you. Could you share your practice of how you evaluate the execution outcome of such workflows? For example, potentially when a beginner's mistaken, I only ask the API to search linking profile based on a name, which will find multiple like results, right? And I know I should add on email and etc. So I'm just wondering, how do you, in your real practice, how do you evaluate the success rate, and then how do you debug and refine?
It's a lot of trial and error and learning from experience, honestly. Like in some cases in automation, like it's pretty clear exactly what the result you expect to be, and even when you're building it, it's easy to evaluate, like, did this do the thing that I expected or not, right? And in others where, because when you're running a test, right, in testing, you're never gonna see every scenario that you might encounter once the automation is live and running, right? You'll see weird, glitchy things. For example, like some APIs, actually most APIs, like if they're designed to look up someone based on an email address, they won't actually run on if the email address is a personal one, like a Gmail account. And that's a good thing, right? But if you're building an automation and you test it on a work address, you wouldn't notice that, oh, this is gonna error out later if someone in my CRM has a Gmail address instead. So there's some things like you can never really test for everything when you're building an automation. And so I think, I tend to think of these things as kind of like living objects that you're kind of like refining over time and evolving over time. And that's honestly a thing that not everyone really wants to spend time doing, like maintaining automations once they're up, which is part of the reason that consultancies like us exist, because we can do that for you. And we actually like it, oddly enough. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah. Also, I'm curious, does he show, for example, like maybe 200 records, 200 records of the clients, and how many I find, how many I fill back? Does he show the traffic going through each route?
Oh yeah, so you can see. I think the question is about like, can you see once the automation is running? Can you see all the times it's run, and can you see what happened and that kind of, yeah. So Zapier, so you won't see it in this one because this is not a real live Zap, but you can see, so firstly at a high level, you can see your Zap history. So these are all your Zaps that have run. And let me find an example of something that did run. So. Yeah, this is a simple one, but so once you have a Zap that's live and running, there's a thing here in the interface called Zap Runs. You can see the history of all the times this thing has run. Sorry, the screen is now zoomed in too much. Yeah. So you can see this sort of log of each time it's run and what the outcome was. Successful, there was an error, whatever, and then you can click into one, and then you can click through step by step and see what happened at each stage in this app. And so if you're debugging something, this is really useful because you can figure out like where the issue was. And then you can also add this thing, again, this is a little more of a like power user feature, but there's something that Zapier has built in called error handling, which is basically like, it's similar to a branch, but it's kind of a built-in feature where if a step errors out, what do I want to happen? Do I want to send me a Slack message or an email or do some other thing? So you can build these into your Zaps so that in the error scenario, you can define what you want to happen after that. Any other questions? Okay, cool. So the next app that we were going to show was around deal pipeline automations. So let me just navigate back to my folder. And what this is going to look like is the deal is won, and now I want stuff to happen. So create a Google Drive folder for the client. Now, you'll notice here that I actually created a different trigger. So you can have a trigger that in Notion is like if a property in a database, like the deal stage property, gets set to 1, then trigger the automation. But in this case, I've actually used a different trigger, and that's called a webhook trigger. Is anyone here familiar with what a webhook is? Okay, so basically what a webhook is in simple terms, it's a way for one app or service to send a message over the web to some other service. And so this is the way apps can send messages to each other to notify them that something has happened and include some package of data. So with Zapier, you can have a trigger that you create a webhook that's like a destination URL, and then you can go into your other app like Notion or whatever it is, and then set up something in that app to, okay, whenever a deal is closed, ping this URL. And that's going to send like a packet of data back to Zapier. And I'll show why I chose to use this. So when you configure this step, the only real thing it's going to give you is a URL. And it's this long, like, not very readable URL with a super long ID string. And what I'm going to do on the Notion side is, actually I want to be in the deals database. So this is, you had the question about Notion's built-in automations. So Notion does have built-in database automations, and sorry, this is really small. And so from within, if you're looking at a database in Notion, you can see this little lightning bolt icon, and that's where you configure Notion's automations. And similar idea is you define a trigger. So I'm going to say my trigger here is deal stage is set to, and let's say closed 1. And then you define what do you want to happen, send a webhook. And here I'm just going to paste in that webhook link that I got from Zapier. And then you just have to tell it, okay, which fields or properties from the Notion database do I want to send to this webhook? Let's just select all of them. It's easier that way. And now you're good. So now, if I take one of these fake deals, and I'm going to set the deal stage to 1, then when I hop over on the Zapier side, I hit the find new records, sometimes takes a second. Okay, there we go. So that's the deal I just sent. Now, the reason that I did this as a webhook instead of just creating it as a Notion native trigger is because I might want to actually trigger this automation in a few different ways. So yeah, I want to have this happen automatically when the deal is closed 1. But what if I also want the option to just be able to create it on demand? Because maybe the deal's not won yet, but I still want to create. I don't want to wait. I want to create a Google Drive folder for the client now because we need to start saving stuff. So what you can do is in Notion, in addition to all these other properties you have, like the date, the probability, the owner, you can add buttons. And so this button I've already configured called create folder. So in a similar fashion, your trigger is just when the button is clicked. Your action is send a webhook. And so now, if I want to just create a Google Drive folder for this client before the deal is closed 1, anyone can click on that button in Notion, and on the Zapier side, that would trigger the same automation. And so the kind of beauty of using webhook triggers in Zapier together with Notion's various automation capabilities is it gives you multiple entry points into the same automation. I don't have to build 2 separate automations that, they're both going to do the same thing, but there might be 2 different cases where I want that to happen. One is automatically when the deal hits close 1, and the other is on demand when someone clicks a button. So it gives you a lot more flexibility. And this is one of the things I find that really makes Notion useful as a CRM, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that I might want to just be able to trigger just by clicking a button, which you can't really build that into like Salesforce or HubSpot. You can just put buttons wherever you want. And one of the, part of the beauty of Notion is it's like infinitely configurable, so you can kind of make whatever you want. So that might have been a bit heavy. Any questions about that before I go on to the rest of the automation? Okay. So the rest of it is fairly similar to what we covered in the previous one, with a few additional steps, though. So
maybe
yeah.
just to. So you use a webhook when you want different triggers to do the same automation, essentially.
Yeah, so that's one use case for it, yes. Another use case could be you might want to trigger an automation from some app that doesn't have a Zapier integration. So there are some SaaS apps that don't necessarily have a Zapier integration built yet, but they do give you the ability to send outgoing webhooks. So they might have their own kind of built-in automation capabilities, say like an email newsletter tool that you're using. Sometimes they don't have a Zapier integration, but they have a whole list of like options. You can send a webhook when someone subscribes, when someone unsubscribes, when a new issue of your newsletter is sent. So that gives you the flexibility to still trigger a Zapier automation, even though they haven't built a Zapier integration. So that can still kick off something that you want to have happen in other systems. So that's another use case. Okay, so the other like kind of key difference here is that this automation was triggered by the deal record, but probably I don't want a separate folder for each deal. I probably just want one folder per company, right? So here what you can do is, so if we want to make sure that we're creating a folder for the company, we can first retrieve the related company record. So each deal in your CRM is going to be linked to one company, maybe multiple, but at least one company. So what you can do then is retrieve the company page. So if you have your records in your CRM, if you're in your CRM linked like this, and I don't think, let me just fix one thing. There's a company set, right? And so this is actually the record I want, not just the deal. So what you can do here is your webhook trigger will include the company from that relation property. So this is basically the ID of the company that was linked to the deal. So I can pull all of that information. I'm pulling that record now. And now I have that. So then I can do something simple like, I'm going to skip over this filter step. I'll come back to that in a second. So now I can create a folder. I can just tell Google, whoops, oh, that got really big. I just tell Google Drive, where do I want this? What parent folder do I want? What drive do I want? And then what's the name of the folder? And then once you've created the folder, it'll give you some basic information like the ID of the folder and a link to the folder. And finally, like we did before, you probably want to copy that back. Then we don't want to copy it onto the company record because we're creating one folder per company. And so we'll have a thing here, and we can just, again, link the output of the Google Drive step. That's a link, and then we write it back. Now, one thing you want to watch out for is how do you make sure you're not creating multiple folders for the same client, right? And so that's where we come back to this filter step. So if this automation is running, and every time you create a folder for a company, that folder link gets stored back on the company record, then you can add a filter so that the next time it runs, if it runs for the same company, you've already retrieved the company page in step 2. So you can add a filter here, and your conditions. So a filter, the conditions are similar to what we looked at with paths, the different branches. But a filter means if it doesn't meet the conditions, then just kill this app. Just don't do anything else. So we're going to say here, so the language is only continue if this is true. So we're going to say only continue if the Google Drive folder property on the company record that we just pulled in step 2 does not exist, meaning it's empty. So if I was to run this step and save something in that field, and then I go and fetch the same company again. Oh, wait a minute, I think I ran it on the wrong thing. So once that returns, if I run this filter, it should say your Zap would not have continued because there's already a link in there. So we're not going to create another one. Okay, that's taking a really long time, so I'm not going to wait for that. Another thing you can add in here, and this is a little just an optional thing, but some of these company names might be really long, right? Maybe they have private limited at the end, maybe they're really long. You don't want your Google folder, like Google Drive folders, to have super long, messy names. And so here's an example of where sometimes like a little sprinkle of AI inside an otherwise deterministic automation can be helpful. So maybe I just want some, there's no way that I can like systematically say like, okay, just make this, the name of this company a little bit more readable, but I can add an AI step. So Zapier has a ton of AI features. I know I said we wouldn't focus that much on AI, but we'll show a little bit of it. And what that lets you do is, maybe you have a very clear step-by-step automation where just one piece of it might benefit from AI for things like summarizing information or classifying an email or things like that. And then all the other pieces of the other steps, you know exactly what you want to happen. So here you can just type a prompt, and I'll say, shorten this company name so that it is appropriate for a Google Drive folder title. And then just like other Zap steps, I can just put in the company. I can just search for the fields that I have. Company name. Oh, no, sorry. Actually, what am I saying? The company name is here somewhere. And I can preview. And so this is the kind of thing where you actually need AI to apply a little bit of subjective judgment, where you can just give it a sort of vague prompt. Okay, it gave me back Orchid Labs private. It didn't take out the private limited. I could write a better prompt, but I think you sort of get the idea. The name was short enough. Maybe I'll say, strip out the suffix. And you can run it again, and hopefully this time it'll strip out the private limited. So again, this step, not critical, not super important, but just to give you a flavor of how, yeah, okay, so it's stripped out. Now it's just got a nice, clean Orchid Labs, no private limited, none of the stuff that isn't really necessary. So just a flavor of how you can use a little bit of AI inside a larger automation. Okay, so that is deal pipeline automations. And again, you can do any number of things, and it doesn't have to be when the deal is closed won. It can be at a different stage in the pipeline. It can be when people click a button. You have a ton of flexibility. Notion and Zapier are two of the most sort of flexible platforms there are, so you can kind of build around whatever your desired workflow is. So next up is going to be Nasri. Any questions on this workflow before we go? Yes, Penelope. Do you want to get our mic?
Thank you. You have a question. I wonder whether or not is Zapier charged by the number of the workflows or by each run, and can you possibly precisely evaluate the cost when you bill for your clients?
Yeah. So okay. So the question was basically how does Zapier's pricing work, and how do you track it and evaluate it? So the way Zapier the pricing model works is based on the number of tasks that you run per month. So there are different tiers of pricing plan, and each tier comes with a preset allotment of total number of tasks in the month. What is a task? A task is every step in an automation. So this step here, when I retrieved a page, from Notion, that's one task. These utility steps, like just the filter, that doesn't count. So ignore that. This AI step is another task. So creating a folder and then updating the company record. So the trigger doesn't count, but all the actions other than this filter count as one task. So this is, 4 tasks. So that means each time this automation runs, it's taking 4 tasks against whatever your plan limit is, and then multiply that by however many times an automation is running. There are lots of ways to kind of optimize also to kind of make your Zaps more efficient, so that they're consuming fewer tasks per run. And it's also the importance of adding filters wherever you can, so you kill an automation when you don't really need it to run. And this is kind of the more experienced Zapier users get really good at figuring out how to optimize those things. In terms of just to give you a sense, the pricing plan we're on gives us 2,000 tasks per month, which sometimes we go a little bit over, sometimes we come way under, because I'm sort of always tinkering with different automations, creating new ones, optimizing other ones. But that's the general pricing model. Any other questions? All right. So with that, I am going to hand over to Nasri, who's going to talk about automatically linking contact records and company records.
Okay, so the one I'm going to be showing you, this is a very simple Zap. The idea is, if you have 2 databases in your CRM, usually in a CRM you'll have a contacts database and a company's database. Ideally, you don't want to be adding new contacts to an existing database manually. So the Zap that we're going to show you is how can you, whenever you add a new contact in, it automatically links it to an existing company inside your company's database. Or if, say, there is no company that already exists, it will create a new company in your company's database. So just going to show you how that works. So example here, if you can see, there's currently 2 databases. Okay, the top one that you see here is the contacts database. Okay, and you have a bunch of contacts and their emails, their primary emails. And at the bottom side, you'll see the company's database. And the company database basically just have typical stuff like the company name, the website, and also the contacts or the people who are working for that company, right? So just very simple one, just 2 one. So I want to be able to create something here. Give me 1 sec. Let me create. Okay, how come you cannot create from here?
You have to go out of present mode.
Okay.
Escape.
Okay. Thanks, Dennis. Let me just escape from here. Okay. So let's say right now, if you can see here, there's a company called Crispy Cocoa, right? Crispy Cocoa Private Limited. And I just have someone who just joined Crispy Cocoa, or I met someone from there, and I'm gonna create a new person here. Call it Julie Cocoa, maybe the cousin or what. Okay, Julie. And I'm gonna add the primary email as well. crispycocoa.com. Okay. So now, automatically, if you know, you want to be able to automate this. So, for example, you make it easy for you. So we're just gonna open this up, and what happens in the background is automatically later there will be a Zap that runs. It will update and find the existing database and look for the domain name, or I would say from the primary email, it will look for this domain, crispycocoa.com. And if there is the company that matches, it will automatically update, right? So while we're waiting for this to update, I'm just going to get another company that's already not inside. So I'll just put in my email. You can see here it already updates, right? Crispy Cocoa Private Limited. So nothing on my end. I didn't have to do anything. It automatic updates. Now, what if there isn't any company here? So I'm just going to add mine. Nasri. Okay. So you can see here at the bottom, at the top part, I've already added my name inside and my primary email at work.flowers. There's no workflowers right now in the company's database, you can see. Right? So if you already downloaded the CRM template demo, you also find the companies and contacts database inside. Right? So you guys can learn and experiment from just these two databases alone. Okay, so we're gonna wait and see what happens. Okay, it's gonna take a while. There we go. So right now you see that there's this new empty page that's being created, but there's no company name. Because ideally, right, what happens is the automation only just collects the domain name from the top here, the workflows, and it created a name. So maybe for now, I'll just edit this. Right? So at least for the initial stage, but without any AI involved, at least for the initial stage, right, I already have my company data or information logged here and linked to myself. So if I want to add Dennis, I want to add Ernest inside, that thing should populate automatically. So now let's look at how the Zap works, right? Okay. You guys let me know if you guys cannot see. Okay, so this is basically a very simple 4-step process, right? First, what happens inside the Zap? First, whenever a new contact gets created, it will find the primary email property. Like just now, I added Nasri at work.flowers, right? So what will happen is it will take that information first, find the primary email. The second one would be, the next step would be to format. Okay, there's a I don't know what is the thing called? Regex. So it's a formatter by Zapier option, right? Which extracts the domain by email. So if you have a bunch of complex like strings, this thing is formatted by Zapier is very useful, and you have a pattern. Later I'll show you how the pattern looks like. And then what needs to happen, once you extract the domain from the email, you will have to find the company record. First, look whether there's any existing company record inside the company's database. If there is, the next step is to link the company to the contact. If there isn't, then create a new company to the company database. Okay, so I'm just going to show you, and we're going to build this from scratch. All right, so let me navigate back first. Can I just click here? Again, I'm not a Mac user, so please forgive me. I'm just gonna create a new one. Okay, gonna create a new Zap. Okay, first, we're gonna find the primary email, right, from the contacts database. Again, if you're not sure, you can do the search functionality. You can just search, and the first thing I want to do is to trigger whenever there is a new data source item. This means that it triggers when a new item is created in the database, and we're gonna select. Okay, I actually shared this already. So this first step, trigger event, new data source item, and then you just link it to your account. Okay, and the data source, this is where you want to link your context template. In your case, when you see it, it will be context template only, right? If you have the CRM templates demo. So I'm gonna click this and then just let it run, just test. Someone say something? Oh, okay. Okay. So let's see from here. So this is the data that I recently set, right? You can see here Nasri at work.flowers. This is, it will just pull the latest data record. Okay, so I'm just going to proceed with this. Okay, so that's done. First step. The second step, what we're going to do is we're going to use what we call the formatter. Okay, formatter by Zapier. And there's a few action events here. And what we want to do is to work with text data, because essentially the field that I enter in the primary email is a text field. So I'm just going to click text field, going to go next. And there's a few buttons here. Again, there's quite a number of ways to transform. Basically using that input that you have and transforming it. In this case, what we're going to use is called an extract pattern. Okay. And the pattern is actually using what we call a Python regular expression. To be honest, I don't know what this exactly means. Essentially, it's just using just some form of formula to extract out a domain from the email. So in this case, the first step would be for this use case is to extract the domain name. The first one would be the @ symbol, which also directly represents the @ in the email. And then the next thing I want to do is do a bracket dot plus. Sorry.
You don't have to know this.
Okay, you don't have to do.
Nobody remembers
Okay.
this. Just ask AI, like, give me the regex expression for this is what I want to do, and then you just paste it.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers this.
Okay, so yeah, so basically this regex pattern it just basically means that to look at the domain name, to look at the string and then return anything that's after the email, after the @ yeah. Okay, so then that's the whole thing that we need. Just gonna test the step and make sure that it really works. Oh yeah, I didn't set the input, right? Okay, so let's set the input first. So the input should match the email, right?
Yeah, you type ID.
Okay, email. Okay, this one. Okay. Okay, gonna retest now. Okay, cool. So that I know the output is already workflows. Okay, next step. Now you're gonna find and find the company, whether it exists in the company database. So we're gonna click this one.
Sorry, just before we go to this step,
Mm.
you were saying we don't remember that formula, so you literally just say take everything after the @ sign, and then.
So I would typically just ask a chatbot, like, if give me the regular expression for stripping out the domain from an email address.
Okay.
And it'll just give you that long thing, and then you just plug it in.
Okay.
Okay, next step, we're going to find the data source item here. We're gonna find the company's database. So data source, I'm gonna choose the companies. Okay, you can see here. So companies template. And I want under the website field, if it already exists in the company's database, to have whatever that is being outputted previously, which is this work.flowers. Okay, so once I select this is done. It's gonna test. Okay, it's done already. Failed to find a data source item in Notion.
I think it didn't save in the configure set.
Okay, let's rework the second
No,
one.
that part is fine. It's step 3. Go back to configure.
Okay, can let's see.
Go to the website. It's not.
Oh, that's
Sorry,
two.
twice.
Okay, let me make sure everything is okay again. Okay, this is good. Oh, okay, yeah. There's one more thing that needs to happen. Over here, create a Notion data source item if it doesn't exist yet. So this is the part where, see, if there is no existing data, you will just create a new field. Okay? So this part is fine. This part's done. You can retest the step. Okay, cool. And now the last one would be to update the data from the context database to the companies. So we're gonna just search for update data source item. And the data source should come from the context template. And again, this part here, the item, because you want it to be custom, because you want to be able to just run this for every single new contact that gets added in. So just type slash, and what you can do is to find the ID of the context database, which is this one, the first one that comes from the first. Okay. And under the related company, right, you want to match it with the ID from the third. And just continue. So now we're gonna test the step. There you go. So that's about it. That's the workflow for creating this Z. Okay. Is there any questions? You guys have any questions to ask about this step?
No, sorry. Oh, just quickly wanted to ask regarding the regex step, right? Is that also considered an action that will get charged for, or?
So formatter is another one of the Zapier utilities that doesn't count. So you can use it as much as you want. So you can do a lot. There's a lot of stuff you can squeeze into that formatter step, so that you know one of the tricks for like being cheap with your Zapier plan.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions about Zapier? About he's the man to ask. It's the expert here. No. Okay, then if there's nothing else, yeah, that's the end for mine. Just to show you. Anyway, I just learned this as well, so it's very easy to learn if you know.
I want to just, since we're doing a pretty good on time, take a little pivot. Instead of showing you that fourth workflow for reporting stuff back to ad platforms, I want to answer like another question you might have had was, why in this automation we just created the company record and all it had was the website property and nothing else was filled out. Why not the company name? Why not do some research? Do similar enrichment. The reason for that is actually like it often makes sense to try to split your Zaps apart into separate, or your automations more broadly into modules, because if you build in the logic of enriching a company record into this Zap might not be the only way that new companies get created in your CRM, right? And so what you can instead do is have some other automation that whenever a new company is added to the CRM, no matter where it's coming from, it does the enrichment. So then you only need to build that workflow once, and again, you have like kind of multiple entry points. So it's kind of like daisy chaining your automations together so that you don't have to repeat the same, because the problem with building the same logic into multiple automations is then you got to Penelope's point earlier, then you got to maintain it, right? Something breaks, you have to remember like, oh yeah, I did the same thing in like 5 different Zaps, let me go and fix them all. So let me show you what we actually do in our workspace, and now so I lied earlier when I said I wasn't really gonna show you any of the AI features. So the way we do this actually on the company side is because company data is a lot easier to find on the open web, which means, so with personal data, like about a specific individual, there's only so much you can find unless they're a high profile person, right? So that's why data enrichment services are really good, because that's their business, is to find data for B2B use cases. If you just want data about a company, you can just do that on the open web. And that means an AI agent can do a web search for you and find that kind of information. So for that, we have a Notion custom agent, which you might have heard about if you've been to any of the Notion events that we've done recently. These are AI agents that can run similar to an automation in Zapier. So they run on a trigger, do a bunch of things, but it's all done as AI. And so we have a bunch of these. But I have one called Company Research Agent. And this agent, again, you have a trigger. This agent gets triggered whenever the website property of a company record gets filled in, which also counts if you create a new record. And then it just has some instructions. The instructions are basically telling it, do some web research on this company based on its URL and other things you can find, and then do some basic enrichment, update the company name, description, find the industry, and then things you can do with AI that you can't do with a traditional deterministic automation is, I want to tell it like, well, what kind of things is my company particularly interested in knowing about this new account in our CRM? Find some recent news, et cetera, et cetera. So if I were to go to our CRM and add a new company, and I'm going to put in apple.com, that is going to kick off this custom agent. And the way I can see that that's happening is once the agent starts going to work, you can actually see it in the comments. So it's like telling you that it's running. So I can click here, and I can just kind of follow the agent as it sort of does its job. So it is going to, sorry, that's a separate automation that automatically fills in the company logo from the website. And you can see this agent kind of just thinking. And okay, it's deciding, what should I look at? It's thinking, it's going to the website. It's going apple.com/about, apple.com/contact. What else is it thinking about? Yeah, these chains of thought are really interesting because you can just see the LLM like talking to itself. Okay. Yeah, it's looking at Apple's newsroom site because in my instructions I told it, find latest developments about this company. Maybe it'll find the information about the lawsuit. Okay. So now it's written me a whole company brief. All about Apple. Okay, maybe I didn't know that they make the iPhone. Now I know. That's helpful. Yeah, and there you go. So this is how we have our actual CRM set up, is one automation just creates the company record and just fills in the website and does nothing else because the agent is going to come in and fill in the rest. And because this is the job where AI is helpful because it can go off to the web, search a bunch of different sources. It can look for specific things that that we care about, and then write a summary in the format that we have told it to. And so now, starting from just a URL, I've got the logo, I've got the kind of official company name, I have the industry, the size, and all that kind of stuff. So
Is it also with Zapier?
no, so this is entirely just Notion. So this is Notion's custom agents feature. So Notion has great automation features on the AI side because you can create these custom agents that can be triggered by and can interact with all your data that's in Notion, as well as other tools that you can connect. What it doesn't do well is if you want deterministic automations where I actually don't need AI for this, I just want it to follow, do X, Y, and Z when something happens. Notion has the database automations, but they're pretty limited. You can't do more complex scenarios. And the ability to integrate with other tools is somewhat limited. So you kind of have a lot of different options to choose from. And there's pros and cons to any approach. There's not really a hard right answer. Everything that we did in Zapier, you probably could do it with custom agents in Notion. but it would get expensive because with Notion custom agents, it's a token or credit-based pricing model. Like because these things run automatically and they're burning tokens and they might be going 24/7, that can't be covered in like a flat subscription plan. So Notion has a separate pricing model for that. It's a great feature, but I think just the kind of knowing when to use AI and in what use cases and when to use something else that's more reliable and cheaper is I think increasingly important. Any other questions? So with custom agents, let me go back to it. So the nice thing about Notion AI is you can choose. So this one I'm using GPT 5.4 Nano, but with my custom agents, Notion gives you the ability to choose almost any like top tier like AI model, and they always have the latest ones like Fable, GPT 5.6, all the way down to the smaller models like Haiku 5.4 Nano, and they have a growing number of open source or open weight Chinese models, which are usually cheaper to run. So as because you pay by usage for Notion custom agents. So when you're picking a model to run, I always first create them on the cheapest possible model and see how it does, and then I'll bump it up if it's not good enough. But you also get this kind of preview. I don't know if you can see it. Like they give you like a little rate card comparing like speed, intelligence, and cost on like a 5-point scale, which is handy when you're just kind of thinking about some tasks like this. Like I don't need a super smart model to just do some research, and like my 12-year-old daughter could probably write this report. So it lets you choose. The other thing on the Notion AI side is it's only custom agents, the ones that run automatically in the background, that consume separate credit-based pricing. If you just want like a general chatbot, that's sort of like regular Notion AI, which you can just talk to here, and you still get access to all the same models. Actually, there's a few more in here that aren't available for some reason in custom agents. So again, you can kind of like pick the models that you want to run, and these don't incur any kind of usage-based pricing. This is, I think on the back end, maybe there's some definitely if you use like Fable for too long, it'll kind of like cut you off and say like, bro, switch to a cheaper model. But you can keep going, you just have to switch for a while. And Notion AI's features are getting increasingly like powerful. Like so, for example, these interactive like HTML artifacts that used to be something you could only do in like Claude or Codex. Notion AI can generate these now as well. It can generate presentations, spreadsheets. This is basically all the same kind of things that Claude or ChatGPT can do. All right, I think that covers everything we wanted to cover. So if there are any last questions, and let me just take a look if anyone submitted. Okay, no questions on the form, but if there are any other questions in the room, yeah?
Yeah, so for Notion, you talk about the token, right?
Sorry, talking about
Token,
the token need for custom agents?
Right. So how do we track the token?
Oh, okay, yes. So to track the token usage, and again, this only matters for the custom agents that run automatically.
Say I paid for like the business account, right?
So custom agents are separate. So if you are on the business account, that costs $20 a month if you're signed up for annual billing. Custom agents are on top of that. So it's a separate billing that you pay by usage. So it's not included in your $20 a month.
I use that for like meetings, and then when there's a transcript, right, then I ask the agent like.
So I think that's different. You're talking about when you just go and chat with Notion here, with Notion AI here, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't cost anything. So that's just part of the business plan. There's no additional charge for that.
I see.
The additional charges are when you build these custom agents, like the one I showed you. And the key difference is these run automatically. They don't wait for you to go talk to them. They run automatically when a database gets updated, or when you get a Slack message, when you get an email. You can define different triggers, just like in Zapier. But these agents run in the background. Sometimes you don't even know that it's happening because you've just set it up and then it's just going. So those incur an additional usage-based pricing. Again, because these things can be running all the time and you might have a lot of them, there's no way Notion can like subsidize that under a $20 a month plan. But if you're just talking about Notion AI where it doesn't do anything unless you go and talk to it, that doesn't cost anything. You can talk to it as much as you want. Yep.
Is the AI task in Zapier also, I mean, is it,
Does
is
it-
it based on tokens or like however run is?
No, so that AI step when you like so the question was do AI tasks in Zapier incur token-based pricing? Short answer is no. Long answer is it's getting more complicated. So let me go in and so they are adding a bunch of functionality to this AI by Zapier actions. Let me just create a new Zap. So similar to, so I would say Zapier and Notion are both kind of similar also in the sense that they give you a way to not lock yourself into one single AI provider because that space is constantly evolving and every other week like a different one is on top. So with this AI by Zapier action, so you write your prompt, you can pass in stuff from an earlier step, tell it what you want it to do. And now this is like a brand new feature. There's kind of this is getting confusing, but there's 3 different options. So you can just do a standard auto where basically it gives you free usage. It counts as a task when this runs, but there's no token-based pricing, and you can use any one of these models. So these are kind of like the cheaper models. There's no Claude here. They're not the latest models. But still, for a lot of stuff that you might want AI for, like I just needed to strip the private limited out of company name, like I don't need Fable for that. So this just counts as one task, just like any other Zap or Zap step. But then maybe I do need a higher model, or maybe I need the AI step to be actually able to use tools. So what are tools? So I could pick advanced. In this case, it counts as 3 tasks. It's still not token-based pricing, but now I get access to some of the kind of like mid-tier, not super powerful models. But the key thing that unlocks is tool use, which is, in addition to just passing in a prompt, maybe I wanted to do a web search, or maybe I wanted to be able, within the AI step itself, to do some action. And so it can do these things like, because maybe I want to write my prompt, do some web research, and then send me a summary in Slack. So I can put that in here and can tell it what I want it to do. Or I might want to connect a knowledge source. So a knowledge source might be, let's say you have like a big folder of documents, right? Like maybe or some your brand guidelines or something like that. You can give it access to that knowledge source that it will use. It'll read that before it executes your prompt. So that gives you more advanced functionality all inside of this AI step, but it'll count as 3 tasks instead of 1. Or if you need really like super powerful, then you can go all the way up to Opus 4.8 or whatever, and then same thing but with a more powerful model, and that'll cost 5 tasks. Lastly, the final option is why isn't this clicking? And this is actually what I would recommend in a lot of cases if you have one. Okay, it's not. Oh, there we go. Is bring your own API key, because if you already have an API key for OpenAI or Claude or Google Gemini, it'll be more cost-effective to just plug in your API key. And then you're still going to pay for the tokens to OpenAI, but there's no sort of like markup on top of it. And then Zapier will only count it as 1 task. So there's a lot of different options, which I think is great, but I also think it's confusing for a lot of users because there's so much choice. Next one, yeah.
Another question. So is there a way to integrate your skills files instead of using higher model? Kind of like using skills via
Yeah.
censored contacts.
Um,
We
not-
are connecting to other source.
You could just upload like a markdown file into the AI stuff as a knowledge source. Or let's say you have it in a Notion page or you have it in a Google Doc, you could do it that way. That's a little bit clunky, especially like if you, let's say you have the same exact skills like running in your Claude environment and you want to leverage them here, there's not a great way, there's no way to sort of directly, feed that in. So there's there's ways to kind of do it, but it's janky. Yeah. Any other last questions? All right. Well, thank you everyone for showing up tonight. We really appreciate it. And let me just put one last thing on the screen. We'd love to stay in touch. And if any of this has given folks ideas about stuff that might be useful and you'd like to kind of talk it through, I'll just leave a QR code up. That QR code will just take you to a booking link if you want to just set up like a free one-on-one consultation to just have a chat. No pressure. Love to talk about this stuff. So would love to stay in touch. I will send out either tonight or tomorrow morning a follow-up email with the link to this document, as well as I'll resend the CRM template. And this document has links to all of the Zap templates that we worked through today. So you can install those in your own Zapier environment and play around with them. But yeah, thank you for coming, and hope to stay in touch.